kamikaze drone found on a quiet Greek island, 550,000 people waiting on the shores of Libya, and a Mediterranean sea surface temperature that is fueling unprecedented tropical-style storms.
Right.
Good morning. You are joining us for the Med-Sea Intel update covering the Mediterranean Sea region. The date is May 21st, 2026.
And this intelligence briefing is brought to you by ProWave AI and is generated by Stylo News, the AI-powered news application.
Good morning. We are analyzing the primary patterns of events across the region over the past 2 weeks.
Exactly. We're mapping out the local, national, and international impacts of these converging pressures.
But before we look at the theater of operations, a quick note on the system generating today's brief. Stylo News is the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Ops software.
Which is quite a tool.
It is. That original enterprise system was built for complex operations across government, military, and international business sectors. So you now have access to the exact same analytical tools and global intelligence feeds utilized by international decision makers.
It really cuts through the noise. And regarding that noise, it is our duty to state explicitly that the source material we are analyzing today contains highly politically charged content.
Very much so, from across the entire political spectrum.
Right. We are looking at deeply debated issues regarding migration and Middle Eastern conflicts. Our mission is to impartially report on this content.
Yeah.
We will present the facts, the different courses of action, and the varying perspectives objectively.
We are not endorsing any specific viewpoint, nor are we here to generate fear, just the intelligence as it stands.
Precisely. So looking at the geopolitical map, the foundation of the current Mediterranean security architecture is shifting beneath our feet.
It really is.
We are tracking a deliberate recalibration of the United States' global military footprint. Most notably, Washington is reducing the number of U.S. troops permanently stationed in Germany.
Which is a move that requires a profound adjustment from European allies. Because when a superpower pulls back its conventional forces, it leaves a vacuum.
A significant one.
Right. The immediate result in Europe is a diplomatic strain regarding collective defense. I mean, the question is who picks up the slack?
And the secondary outcome is an accelerated push for European strategic autonomy. They're realizing they can no longer wait for Washington to dictate the security posture.
Exactly. France, for instance, is actively planning to deploy and establish permanent military installations in Cyprus by 2026 or 2027.
Cyprus is geographically vital. It operates essentially as an unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Right.
By positioning forces there, France is asserting European Union leadership over a highly contested maritime zone. It's a calculated move to Project Stability.
However, as the conventional military footprint, the traditional bases and troop deployments, as that shifts, the actual nature of the threat is changing.
Yes, the immediate danger on the southern flank is no longer categorized as a conventional kinetic attack.
Right. We are not seeing preparations for traditional warfare. No columns of tanks or fighter jets crossing borders.
The threat is hybrid. Since 2022, security agencies have documented 191 Russian hybrid incidents across Europe.
Wow. And for clarity, hybrid warfare refers to actions that hover just below the threshold of open conflict.
Right. Cyber intrusions, election interference, infrastructure sabotage.
Or the use of deniable proxy forces. It is persistent and it is rising. I mean, a highly specific data point emerged just recently in Greece.
The Lefkada incident.
Yes. Authorities recovered a kamikaze drone, a loitering munition designed to crash into a target and detonate, and they found it in Lefkada.
Which is alarming.
It is. Intelligence directly links this hardware to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Finding that drone in the Ionian Sea, which is hundreds of miles from the Eastern European front, perfectly exemplifies the modern gray zone.
It represents a transnational spillover.
Exactly. NATO and EU security agencies are heavily monitoring this discovery because it signals that the operational theater of Eastern Europe is bleeding into the Mediterranean maritime domain.
It forces a rapid, unscheduled evaluation of the region's air defense readiness against these small, asymmetric threats. But let me jump in here and analyze the strategy.
Go ahead.
The historical NATO doctrine was built heavily on deterrence, the idea of a tripwire.
Right. If an adversary crosses a clear line, an overwhelming conventional military response is triggered.
Exactly. But hybrid warfare is essentially slipping a piece of paper under the tripwire without snapping it. So, how do Allied commanders respond to a gray zone threat, like a drone washing up in Greece, without triggering an unwanted full-scale escalation?
Well, the current doctrine requires proportional, non-escalatory countermeasures. A drone discovery does not warrant a missile strike.
Right.
Instead, the response relies on enhanced intelligence sharing across borders,
Yeah.
the quiet fortification of cyber defenses around critical logistics hubs, and significantly heightened maritime surveillance.
It is a posture of resilience.
Yes, designed to absorb and deflect these provocations rather than meet them with direct kinetic confrontation.
And that strategy of resilience is being severely tested by state actors within the region as well. Turkey is rapidly expanding a naval and territorial doctrine known as the Blue Homeland.
A very ambitious framework.
It is. It aims to consolidate control over critical maritime routes and vast energy corridors throughout the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean.
The intelligence pipeline indicates an impending legislative move by the Turkish parliament, actually.
Right, expected before the end of this month.
Yes, to formally codify the Blue Homeland Doctrine into national law. And codifying this doctrine transforms it from a political aspiration into a strict legal mandate for the Turkish state.
Which fundamentally alters the diplomatic landscape, because the map proposed by the Blue Homeland directly overlaps with the territorial waters and exclusive economic zones claimed by Greece and the Republic of Cyprus.
And beyond the legal maneuvers, there is a profound tactical asymmetry on the water itself. Turkey possesses a registered fishing fleet of over 300,000 vessels.
300,000.
Yes. Naval analysts observe that this massive civilian fleet can act as a de facto reserve force. They can be utilized for continuous maritime presence, intelligence gathering, and gray zone operations.
Which vastly outnumbers Greece's active military personnel, currently standing at roughly 115,000.
It creates an incredibly complex environment for a maritime commander.
Oh.
I mean, if thousands of civilian vessels are potentially operating as surveillance assets, the traditional rules of engagement are heavily strained.
Highly strained, and the ripple effects of this doctrine extend well beyond Greece. Israeli decision-makers perceive Turkey's maritime expansion as a strategic encirclement.
Right, because Turkey is establishing a presence and building bases as far south as Somalia.
In Tel Aviv, this wide net is viewed as a direct vulnerability for Israeli energy interests and, well, their broader security architecture in the Eastern Mediterranean.
And it is vital to note that this concentration of naval power and this territorial friction is occurring in the exact same waters where we are witnessing an unprecedented movement of human beings.
The macro-level geopolitical instability, the power vacuums, shifting alliances, and proxy conflicts we just outlined, it inevitably creates the conditions for mass migration.
The Mediterranean Sea remains a critical global choke point for displaced populations.
And the numbers currently tracked by border agencies are daunting. The Greek government, communicating through Migration Minister Thanos Plevris, has issued a formal assessment that approximately 550,000 migrants are currently staging in Libya.
500,000 people.
Yes, awaiting passage to Europe. Now, it is important to contextualize this. Irregular crossings to the European Union actually dropped by 40% in early 2026.
However, authorities attribute this decline almost entirely to severe winter sea conditions and temporary border cooperation agreements.
Right, the weather kept them on the shore.
Exactly. With the arrival of summer weather, the operational pressure on the maritime borders is mounting rapidly. We are seeing distinct, sometimes conflicting courses of action taken by European states to manage this pressure.
In Greece, Minister Plevris is executing a strategy heavily focused on physical fortification and deterrence.
Yes, which entails tightening the legal requirements for asylum processing, constructing physical coastal barriers, and significantly increasing armed Coast Guard patrols near the island of Crete.
Because Crete serves as a primary destination for smuggling vessels departing from the shores of eastern Libya.
Meanwhile, Italy is pursuing a completely different mechanism of control.
Right. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni recently hosted Libyan Prime Minister Dabeba in Rome for bilateral talks.
Italy's approach acknowledges the reality that Libya is the central logistics hub for this migration route. Rome is attempting to manage the crisis through economic investment and security cooperation directly with Libyan factions.
Their goal is to stabilize the departure points and intercept the flow before the vessels ever reach the water.
But these varying national strategies are colliding in an increasingly volatile international maritime zone. A review of the May 11th incident illustrates this friction perfectly.
That was a highly concerning event.
Very. Armed vessels linked to the Libyan Coast Guard fired live ammunition at the German non-governmental rescue ship, the Sea-Watch 5.
And this occurred shortly after the humanitarian vessel had rescued approximately 90 migrants from a distressed dinghy in the Mediterranean.
To understand the mechanics of this confrontation, we have to look at the conflicting mandates operating simultaneously in those waters.
It's a structural conflict.
Yeah.
On one side of the equation, the European Union and its border agency, Frontex, are actively providing funding, training, and equipment to the Libyan Coast Guard.
Right, their mandate is strict border security and the dismantling of illicit human trafficking networks.
On the other side, you have humanitarian NGOs operating under a vastly different legal and moral framework. For perspective, the medical NGO emergency reports having rescued over 3,200 migrants in just the past 3 years.
Their mandate is focused strictly on international human rights law, which requires open rescue operations for any vessel in distress.
And the result is this profound friction. The official European policy prioritizes territorial integrity and the disruption of the smuggling economy.
While the non-governmental organizations prioritize immediate life-saving interventions at sea, these two mandates cannot operate in the same space without clashing.
Leading to tactical confrontations in international waters that generate immense diplomatic fallout and public scrutiny.
We can actually measure that public scrutiny directly through social media sentiment, particularly analyzing the data streams from X.
And the public discourse is highly critical, deeply wary of the policy failures on all sides.
When tracing the root causes of the Libyan staging ground, a massive portion of the digital sentiment points directly back to the fallout of the 2011 NATO intervention in Libya.
Yes, the removal of Muammar Gaddafi created a total collapse of state authority.
Users across the political spectrum frequently point to that historical event as a catastrophic strategic failure, one that shattered the Libyan state, empowered armed factions, and directly engineered the massive migration crisis we are seeing today.
It's a very unified sentiment. Interestingly, alongside this criticism, there is a measurable baseline of approval regarding Italy's current military modernization efforts.
Specifically, their acquisition of advanced Typhoon fighter aircraft.
Right. Users seem to view this hardware upgrade as a pragmatic, necessary defensive posture in a region that has become structurally destabilized.
Now, the movement of people across these waters is inextricably linked to the resources they are fleeing from or heading toward.
We have to analyze how energy economics and climate change are acting as massive threat multipliers to the security and migration issues we've just detailed.
The intelligence highlights a highly fragile standoff between the United States and Iran in the Strait of Hormuz.
Which, for those looking at the map, the Strait of Hormuz is roughly 3,000 miles away from the Mediterranean, but the causality is direct and immediate.
Absolutely. The strait is the world's most critical energy choke point.
Any physical disruption to maritime oil traffic there, or even the threat of disruption, instantly manifests in southern Europe.
It causes severe spikes in fuel prices, a drastic increase in shipping insurance rates, and subsequent domestic economic unrest across the European continent.
So the physical security of the Mediterranean is completely tethered to the economic stability of the Persian Gulf.
Recognizing this profound vulnerability, decision-makers in southern Europe are pivoting to secure regional alternatives. Italy, for example, is executing a long-term strategy to position itself as an independent European energy hub.
They are currently constructing high-capacity submarine renewable energy cables, connecting the Italian grid directly to solar and wind infrastructure in North Africa.
Simultaneously, the energy conglomerate Total Energies is actively expanding its Mediterranean hydrocarbon exploration. They are partnering with Egypt to tap into the deep-water natural gas reserves off the coast of Alexandria.
But the pursuit of energy independence is colliding head-on with a severe meteorological reality.
The climate is no longer a background issue.
It is a compounding threat multiplier. The meteorological data is striking. The Mediterranean Sea's surface temperature is currently rising by 0.4 degrees Celsius per decade,
which is a massive injection of thermal energy.
It fundamentally alters the region's weather patterns. It is fueling increasingly severe metacanes. These are tropical-like Mediterranean hurricanes.
The recent intelligence briefs specifically detail the impact of Metacane Jelena in 2026,
which follows historical, highly destructive storms like Ionos and Daniel. These systems have devastated coastal infrastructure, wiped out agricultural zones, and caused massive flooding in Greece and Libya.
Furthermore, North Africa is currently trapped under a massive heat dome, pushing sustained ambient temperatures to 50 degrees Celsius.
That's 122 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes. The intersection of these meteorological extremes with the geopolitical fragility of the region is critical.
Let me push back on the standard policy frameworks we are seeing from European capitals right now. Decision makers in Rome, Athens, and Brussels are legislating and budgeting for migration, primarily as a geopolitical or border security issue. They're building walls and funding coast guards.
Yes, traditional deterrence.
But if the agricultural lands of North Africa are flooding from metacanes and the ambient temperatures are consistently hitting 50 degrees Celsius, isn't this no longer a border dispute? Aren't we looking at a permanent, climate-driven demographic shift that traditional border enforcement simply cannot physically stop?
The synthesis of our intelligence strongly supports that assessment. The combination of failing regional governance, severe economic distress driven by energy volatility, and increasingly unlivable extreme weather creates what defense analysts term a cumulative destabilization effect.
Right.
This paradigm shift will inevitably outpace traditional kinetic security measures. A coastal wall, no matter how well patrolled, cannot deter a population that is fleeing an environment that can no longer sustain human life.
The root causes are moving beyond the reach of military solutions.
Exactly. Based on this complex operational picture, we will now synthesize the intelligence to project the most likely trajectories.
What should you watch for in the near term?
First, the intelligence indicates that a direct conventional interstate attack on southern Europe remains highly unlikely.
We are not tracking troop massing or supply line preparations for open warfare against a NATO member state. The threat is insidious, not overt.
You should monitor 4 specific developments. Number 1, watch for the official passage of Turkey's Blue Homeland Maritime Law.
When that codification occurs, expect immediate diplomatic friction and potentially naval posturing with Greece, Cyprus, and the broader European Union.
Number 2, anticipate intense cumulative stress on European border security infrastructure.
As the summer weather holds and sea conditions become favorable, the potential for rapid, overwhelming spikes in maritime migration from that staging population of 550,000 in Libya is extremely high.
Number 3, prepare for further hybrid disruptions. The gray zone will remain highly active.
Watch for deniable cyber activity, targeted disinformation campaigns, or physical sabotage centered around critical European logistics ports.
Specifically, the Augusta Port Complex in Sicily or the Suda Bay Naval Base in Greece.
And finally, number 4, monitor Russia's ongoing strategic maneuvering in Africa.
Utilizing the political fragmentation in Libya as a gateway, Russia is steadily working to build a security arc.
This arc stretches from the Libyan coast on the Mediterranean deep south into the central African Sahel.
By providing security assistance to various factions and military juntas, Moscow aims to project enduring, long-term influence across the African continent.
Directly challenging and displacing Western strategic interests.
This concludes the formal intelligence assessment for the Mediterranean region. As noted at the beginning of our broadcast, we want to detail the capabilities of the Stylo News platform that aggregated today's insights.
Stylo News is available as both a mobile application and a desktop platform. It is a fascinating piece of technology for anyone trying to navigate today's media environment.
The application utilizes advanced artificial intelligence, specifically relying on vector embeddings and a process called retrieval augmented generation, commonly known as RAG technology.
Right.
To explain the mechanics simply, unlike a standard AI that just relies on its pre-trained memory to answer a question, RAG technology allows the system to actively read and retrieve information in real time.
The Skylo app constantly ingests over 250 diverse global sources, processing more than 20 languages simultaneously.
It translates, normalizes, and indexes this massive flow of global data.
You can customize the application to generate your own personal intelligence-style briefs, drawing from hundreds of traditional news outlets as well as live social media sentiment from platforms like X.
It essentially gives you the research capacity of an entire intelligence desk right in your pocket.
If you want clarity in an overwhelming information environment, you can subscribe to Stylo News today to get AI-powered news on demand. Just visit www.stylonews.com.
The tool is invaluable for maintaining a clear, objective view of global events.
Phew. All right, stepping away from the news desk for a moment. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We know these are incredibly heavy, complex, global issues, and we really appreciate you taking the time to unpack all of this with us.
Yeah, it is always a rewarding experience to analyze these vital topics and, to really look at the mechanisms driving the headlines.
We definitely want to hear from you. What should we investigate next? Please reach out and request topics or regions for future deep dives. And don't forget to follow Stylo News on all your favorite social media platforms to keep up with the latest updates as they happen.
We look forward to seeing your suggestions and diving into the next geopolitical puzzle.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We spent a lot of time today talking about the immense pressure on these Mediterranean borders, the coastal walls, the armed Coast Guard patrols, the sheer human desperation of 550,000 people waiting on a beach. But consider the trajectory of the technology we've been discussing. As AI and autonomous drone technology become cheaper, smarter, and infinitely more accessible, how long until human border patrols are entirely replaced by autonomous, AI-driven surveillance networks? And when the borders of Europe are guarded by machines making calculations instead of human beings? What does that mean for the desperate people trying to cross those waters?
Until next time.